Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. We have a very special guest on today's episode, former All-Pro lineman who played for the University of Miami Hurricanes, the Pittsburgh Steelers, for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's done so many incredible things throughout his football career and has many great stories to tell. Today's guest is Leon Searcy. Leon, thank you so much for being on today's episode. It is a great honor and privilege to have you on Huddle Up.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Leon, reading through your book, it was absolutely fantastic. Your autobiography, Fourth Down and Damn, A Lineman's Tale, is now out. It's available on Amazon in America, Canada, international shipping. This was such a great book to read. I really enjoyed diving into your story, especially particularly after I'd known about the different places you've played, having seen the famous now ESPN 30 for 30 documentary, Catholics versus Convicts, highlighting the famous rivalry game between the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and the Miami Hurricanes. I want to start back at the beginning, though. You're from Orlando, Florida, and in your childhood, there was a specific instance in the book that talks about your motivation for doing well in football. You were playing when you were about 10 years old, and your coach had been disrespectful in not making you feel confident that you could play on the team. And your mom, she had something to say otherwise to that. And from there, things changed dramatically. What went through your mind during that moment? And take us a little bit through what you were thinking through the interaction and how your perspective on playing football changed.
Well, I was 10 years old. I was actually born in Washington, D.C., where it happened. Back in those days, organized football actually cost money. So your parents had to actually save up money for you to play football. And I had always been, I'd always played street ball, tackle football, but I never played organized football. So me and a couple of my friends actually walked about a couple of miles to a field where they were having organized football. We had the money to pay for the gear and everything like that. So we initially, when we first got to the field, we already knew when we walked on the field, we felt like outcasts, so to say, because the organized football was in a prominent area, where kids have money. They had cleats, they had jerseys and all that kind of stuff. And we were street kids, basically. And we came in there with our, tennis shoes and our shorts and everything. So we felt like outcasts from the first place. And then when we got there, the kids in those days and maybe in these days can be kind of stuck up, and you'd be hard on other kids that they feel that are less fortunate than them. And the kids kind of razzed on us because, we were inner city kids and we basically walked to the prominent area where the kids could afford to play football. But we had the money and we got in line, and the kids were picking on us. They knew that we weren't from around the area. And, we were confident that we could do whatever they could do. But it was just the stigma of knowing that we were street kids and they were suburban kids that made us feel uncomfortable. And the kids picked on me. I was a little chubby kid at the time, but I was very athletic, and I went through the drills, and I did well. And I actually collapsed on the ground after I had finished running the drills, and the kids had respect for me because I had run the drills so well. And one of the coaches came up to me and grabbed me up and basically told me that I was too big or too fat to be on this field. And he sent me home, and, I cried. I was 10 years old. I was offended. Everybody was laughing at me on my way. And my mom, saw me walk into the house and asked me how football practice was. And I didn't say anything. I went to my room. I was upset, and she went upstairs. She asked me what happened. And I told her, I was honest with her, what one of the coaches said to me while I was practicing. And my mama, she turned into like a lioness protecting her cub. She told me, she got me in the car. She drove me to the place, and she told me that I better point out the guy who said what he said to me. I was a little nervous, and she took me by the hand on the field, and I pointed out to the coach that told me to get off his field. And my mom went up to his face and said, "Listen, are you the coach that said that my son couldn't play football for you?" He said, "Yes, ma'am, I did." She said, "I want you to remember this name." She said, "His name is Leon Searcy." And she said, "You're going to be the coach." Well, she said, "You're going to be the dumbass who didn't coach him when he goes to the next level, when he plays in the NFL." And my mom planted that seed to me real early. My mom always believed in me. She always told me that anything you put your mind to, you can accomplish. So she planted that seed in me real early that I could be anything I wanted, and I appreciated her for that.
It's such an incredible story. with how a moment of dejection could really plant a seed of inspiration that ended up being harvested when you became an NFL player. And it's just crazy to think of how moments like those where people may feel upset or that they don't belong can actually be the turning point. And it really seemed that was critical in your life to propel you to have that motivation to prove your mom right, that you would be able to play at that next level.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, my mom was an educator. You know, my mom was a school teacher, a counselor, and a principal for over 45 years. And, you know, I only played 1 year of high school football. My mom was a stickler on education. And my mom knew in middle school that I would skate by, barely get by. You know, I was a C+ student. But my mom knew that in high school that I was going to I needed to apply myself a little bit more than I was when I was in middle school. So she told me that I couldn't play sports until I had a 3.0. So you can only imagine me being one of the biggest kids in high school, not being able to play sports. And I ended up going into my junior year. Well, the end of my junior year, start of my senior season. I went out for football, and I was nervous about it. I had trained for like months just to get myself prepared for spring football, and I can remember it to this day. And I even elaborated on the book. It was seventh period. It was the first day of football practice. And I had done all the training that I felt necessary to get myself prepared for football. But I remember when that school bell rang for seventh period, I walked out of the school and I looked to my right and I saw all the kids walking towards the football field to play football. And I was still intimidated by the fact that I had never played organized football before. And right in front of me was my school bus to go home. And I remember actually stepping on my school bus, getting on the school bus, them closing the door, and then the school bus driver taking off, and something in my spirit told me to get off the bus. So I told the school bus driver to stop the bus so I could get off and go out and try out for football. And I think to this day, if I had never gotten off that school bus, I probably wouldn't be speaking to you right now. Because, you know, if you get on the school bus one day, it's easy to get on the next day and the next day and the next day. But I took the initiative to get off that school bus, even though I was frightened, even though I was fearful. I knew that it was the right thing to go out there for football practice. So, I mean, the rest is history. I thank myself to this day. To this day, I thank 16-year-old Leon that he got off that school bus, because I probably wouldn't be where I am right now today if I had stayed on that school bus.
You touched upon something that I think is very important, and that's in that part of the story, is that you were fearful. So you were fearful and you were scared about what may happen if you didn't achieve what you were looking to achieve. And you got off that school bus despite being scared, and you were able to go try. And I think that carries a bit of a theme with a person that is on their journey to becoming a professional athlete, especially a world-class one such as an NFL player. And that carries into the next part of the story I want to touch upon, was getting to the University of Miami. Now, the U is one of the most famous football programs in all of America in the NCAA. And you were going to play under, again, one of the great college head coaches and became a Hall of Fame head coach in the NFL, Jimmy Johnson. What really motivated you to get to that next level in terms of playing college, and why it was important for you to keep going? Because you had played the 1 year of high school football, was great, but then why college?
Well, the only reason why I went out for football, to be quite honest with you, although I had the grades to go to college, I knew my mom and dad had worked so hard. And I knew that they were doing enough to, keep us afloat. And the last thing I wanted to do is be a burden on my parents by having them to have to pay for me to go to college. So I had the opportunity to actually, it was a scout. I was actually walking in the hallways in high school, and a scout from LSU came up to me, and he thought it was another guy. And he asked me if I played football. And I told him I didn't. And he told me that, that if you play football, you can get a scholarship to go to college. And that's exactly, when he told me that, that's when I made a decision that I was going to actually, prepare myself to play, get myself ready for college, so get a scholarship to play football. And I didn't have any trainers. I was self-motivated. What I would do every day, I would go before even football practice started. Every day I would purposely skip the bus, wouldn't catch the bus home, so I could run about 3.5 miles from the school to my home to get myself in shape. I would get home, I would do my chores, I would do my homework, and then I would go to my middle school, and I would just work on my footwork and remember this now, this is without any trainers and without any friends, without any more. So I was self-motivated. I was focused and determined that I was going to get the scholarship wherever I was going to. And I ended up going to spring ball, and I started off as a third string nose guard in spring ball. And by the end of spring ball, I was a starting right tackle at my high school. And my high school coach didn't want me to get complacent. So my high school coach actually told me after spring ball was over that he wanted me to go to summer school. Now, back in those days, the only time you went to summer school is when you have the grades. And I had the grades. I had a 3.75 grade point average. But back in those days, you did whatever your high school coach told you to do. For that whole summer, I woke up every morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I went from summer school from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock every day. And I just trained. I ran, I worked. My high school coach trained me and worked me and got myself in some shape to the point where when we started summer camp, I was in the best shape of my life. And University of Miami really didn't come about. I had 2 scholarship offers initially. I had Florida A&M and South Carolina State. I thought I had done something because I had them interested in me. But University of Miami came about because of just the tenacity of the way I played. My senior year, it grasped their attention. And it would have been easy for me to just go to any other school, and I probably would have started. But I knew that if I went to the University of Miami, I knew that was where the great players played at, and I wanted to see if I could excel at that university. So that's why I chose Miami, because I knew that if I could play there, that I would have an opportunity to play at the next level.
And with looking at all the NFL players that the Miami Hurricanes have produced, especially in and around that time, you had a few teammates who gathered a lot of notoriety after the time at Miami, and one for football and the other not for football. And in your rookie year, it talks about in the book a story of your interactions with Michael Irvin when you guys got a big win, and as well as somebody who was a freshman when you were a senior in Dwayne Johnson, the Rock, who's also a player that played for the Hurricanes. So I first want to touch on Michael Irvin and those first few years. What was that experience like, playing alongside and being on the same team as somebody like him? And what were your first impressions of the whole program overall?
Well, I remember the first time I came to the University of Miami. It was freshman orientation, and we were checking into the dorms. And I remember seeing Michael Irvin. I was starstruck because, Michael Irvin had established himself as one of the great wide receivers in college football at that particular time. And I remember seeing him walk into class one day, and I told my dad, "Yeah, that's Michael Irvin. That's the playmaker." So I knew that, Mike, had this certain aura about him, this confidence about him, this cockiness about him, that just went along with being a Miami Hurricane. And, he took me under his wing. He was the type of guy that wanted to see you succeed, and he would give you any kind of advice that you asked for. He was also the first guy to give me my first drink, by the way. That was in the book as well. But yeah, Michael Irvin to this day is a consummate professional. He was always he was a star at the University of Miami. He was always the hardest working guy on the football field. So I respected that about him. So he taught me how to train. He taught me how to be a motivator. He taught me about confidence and working hard and everything that went along with it. Now, Dwayne Johnson, the Rock, Dewey is what his nickname was. His nickname was Dewey. We called him at University of Miami. Dewey was a hard worker. I mean, he trained hard. He was physical. He came from a family that were athletes and wrestlers and everything like that. So he was already locked and loaded on how to train and how to work out and everything. Now, he just had the unfortunate task of having to be at the University of Miami at the same time where the all-time greats were playing, which is Warren Sapp. So when Warren Sapp got there, I mean, Dwayne Johnson had absolutely no chance of playing. He was a backup for the majority of the time he was at Miami, but he was still a competitor. He never griped or moaned. He just gave effort each and every day that I know him as a player. And, I have much respect for that because he came into the University of Miami highly touted, as a defensive tackle. It just so happened that Warren Sapp happened to be there, that he really didn't see the field that much. But he was a consummate backup. So he did help with us win some championships. But it's hard to be someone like Sapp. I mean, Sapp, someone who's University of Miami all-time great and is in the NFL Hall of Fame.
And the particular story in the book that I found super hilarious, talking about you interacting with Sapp when he was saying, "No, Leon, I'm going to play tight end." And you were like, "Okay, we'll see." And you told him he was going to play defensive end because that's where he would have succeeded. And he ended up making the switch kind of out of his hands. The coaches made that switch for him, and we look and see what the results are. And he had a Hall of Fame career and won a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers under John Gruden. And so, what was it like being teammates with Sapp? He must have been quite the competitor to play against.
Well, yeah, listen, Sapp is hilarious. I love Warren Sapp. A lot of people don't know this, and I reflected on it in the book. I was Warren Sapp's host when he came to University of Miami. Because Sapp is from the Orlando area. He's from Apopka, and I was from that area as well. So I was his host, and I had to entertain him at University of Miami. And I actually helped him, get to University of Miami. But I remember Sapp. A lot of people don't know this, that Warren Sapp, when he came out of high school, he was a number one tight end in the state of Florida. Sapp was a tight end. He was 6'3", 245 pounds, 250-pound tight end when he came on our visit. Now, when he came back that summer, Sapp was 285. Okay. So the last time I told Sapp, I remember telling Sapp when he came back, I said, Sapp, when's the last time the University of Miami had a 6'3", 285-pound tight end? I said, it's not going to happen, bro. I said that in a couple of years, they're going to end up moving you to defensive tackle. And Sapp, he wasn't having that. He's stubborn as they all outside, but he still had the hands, he still had the feet. And I remember doing spring drill about a couple of years later, and I had the ropes, and Sapp was going through the ropes, and I said, Sapp, your big ass, they're gonna move your big ass to defensive tackle. And lo and behold, right after we finished doing that camp, he was in the defensive lines meeting room, and I just happened to be outside the defensive lines meeting room when they told him to go in the defensive line meeting room. And he happened to be sitting in the Rock's chair. And the Rock came into the meeting room and asked Sapp what he was doing in the defensive line meeting room. And Warren Sapp turned to the Rock and told him, I'm here to take your bleeping position. And the rest was history.
That story it really rings true in terms of the confidence that you see exerted by Warren Sapp to this day, and especially how he was on the field. And unfortunate for the Rock to have been up against what was going to be a future Hall of Famer in the NFL. But you look at the way that the Rock's career turned out, and even up here in Canada, his talk of being cut in the CFL and having $7 in his pocket, and what ended up happening with him going to the WWF, WWE, as they say, sometimes the thing that you wanted the most not happening is the best thing that could have happened to you. And it's great to see that it worked out for both of them in the end. Great Hall careers.
Absolutely. I tell you this, the Rock wouldn't trade it for anything in the world right now. I mean, he's the number one superstar in the world, to be quite honest with you.
He's one of the most electrifying personalities to have ever existed in the world of entertainment. And thanks to Vince McMahon and everything that they were able to do together in those first years and in the mid to late 90s, it's just crazy to think of. In a way, when I was reading through the book, I almost kind of felt like it was like Forrest Gump in a book because of many of the origin stories and just you being that character that's there to witness all these beginnings for famous people. Even on draft day, the young reporter from ESPN who came to do the interview with you right after you were getting drafted was a guy by the name of Stuart Scott. And it's crazy to think about how many of these people you interacted with during the very, very beginnings of what became legendary careers.
Yeah, it was. On my draft day, I remember it like it was yesterday. Because the draft is only next month. I get interviewed and ask me about my draft day. Yeah, I remember the draft was at noon back in those days. It's not like the prime time like it is now. And I just remember me and my dad waking up about 6 o'clock in the morning. My dad was taking me to walk across the neighborhood, so I wouldn't forget where I came from. And we get back to the house somewhere around 8:30, 9 o'clock. And there's media outlets all throughout the front yard and everything. And they're trying to get an interview with me to ask about the draft and stuff like that. But I wouldn't take any interviews until I got drafted. But my father knew of Stuart Scott because my dad worked at the airport, Orlando International Airport, and Stuart would come through there frequently. And him and my dad would talk. So my dad told me, hey, Stuart's a good friend of mine. Make sure he gets the first interview when you get drafted. So, yeah, that was Stuart Scott who actually interviewed me first once I got drafted by the Steelers in 1992.
And even on that draft day as well, aside from the Stuart Scott interview, there was a lot of strong talks about you getting a contract offer to go play for the Dallas Cowboys. And there was there was a gentleman from the Cowboys who showed up with your jersey and number and everything stitched on the back. And then lo and behold, with the 11th pick, you were announced after getting a call from Coach Bill Cowher that you were going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. So talk about some of the emotions that went through your mind with the rapid switch from, I'm going to be a Dallas Cowboy, great, to, oh, with the 11th pick, they select, he said, Ed Searcy, the commissioner at the time, even though, it's Leon Searcy. But how crazy was that, like, turn of events?
Well, when I initially got the call from Coach Johnson at about 10:30 or about hours before the draft, I was a little bit on edge. There was a lot of anxiety that was involved with me because I wasn't sure if I was going to be drafted. There was different projections of where I was going to go. I was going to go high in the first round, low in the first round. I just wanted to be drafted in the first round. And I remember Coach Johnson calling me about 10:30 in the morning. He told me that I was going to be the Cowboy. And at that particular time, the Dallas Cowboys had the 17th pick in the draft. And he told me I was going to be a Cowboy. So I felt a little bit more comfortable with Jimmy Johnson because he had recruited me. He was with the Cowboys. And Jimmy had an agenda that he wanted his guys from Miami that he recruited. He knew the guys that worked hard, that put a lot of effort into their practice and what they did. So that was one of the reasons why Jimmy was coming after me. But Bill Cowher called me, about the 8th pick in the draft. The 8th pick in the draft, I got the call from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's Bill Cowher. And Bill Cowher says, "Hey, Leon, we have the 11th pick in the draft, and you're going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler." So I stayed on the phone with him until I got drafted. So then when we get to the 11th pick and they mentioned my name, well, actually they didn't mention my name. They said Ed Searcy, but I knew exactly who they were talking about. I was elated. I was excited. My family was jumping around, screaming, hugging, crying, all that kind of stuff that was going on. And I remember the Dallas Cowboy representative in the back had tore up the contract that him and my agent were negotiating. And before he left, he had my jersey, Cowboy jersey with 73 and Searcy on the back of it. And I asked him before he left, I said, "Hey, man, before you leave, let me get that jersey. I mean, you're not going to need it." And he turned to me and he said, "Son," he said, "understand this." He said, "You're a Steeler now." And he said, "A Cowboy would never give a Steeler nothing." And I was like, "Okay, all right, I understand the rivalry now." But that was my draft day story. I'll never forget it. I remember it like it was yesterday.
And to think about all the emotions that would go through someone's mind when being selected in the first round of the NFL draft is absolutely staggering to ponder. And even through those first years, I remember there was a line in the book you mentioned where, there's agents that show up and they try to tell you about the amazing life of an NFL player and the money and the cars and the fame and the women and all these sorts of things. But you mentioned in the sentence after that, you learned later on that they'd say just about anything to get you to come play in the NFL. So did you feel a lot of fear or anxiety for when you were actually going to strap up for the Steelers and play 92, or did you feel a sense of excitement? What was that like?
Well, unfortunately, I mentor to a lot of young athletes that go into the next level, and sometimes they feel obligated to spend a lot of money, hang out, drink a lot, chase after women, and some of those proponents are what lead to most of their downfall because a lot of guys don't realize the importance of saving your money and protecting your body until it's too late. And that's the agents, that's how they attract you. They attract you with the flash and dash. They attract you with the money and the trips and the cars and the clothes and the jewelry and all that kind of stuff. And that's unfortunate that a lot of guys are proponents to that throughout their whole career, and they don't realize it's all smoke and mirrors until it's too late. But I didn't feel any real anxiety about going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I knew I'd come from a storied program that had prepared me well to play at the next level. The unfortunate thing about me, the reason why I didn't actually play my rookie year is because I held out all the way through training camp. The Steelers were notorious for not playing their players back in the day, and they wanted to make an example out of me because I held out for so long. So my rookie year in Pittsburgh, I didn't start not one game. I did mop-up duty. I did scout team play. So I knew that for the most part, although I might have been prepared to play, I thought that the Steelers were trying to exert themselves upon me about holding out. So, I dealt with it professionally. I didn't go to the media. I didn't gripe. I didn't moan. I just knew that when I did have the opportunity, I would let them know why they drafted me in the first round, 11 pick overall. And when I got that opportunity, I damn sure made the most of it.
You absolutely did, and played during some of the craziest years of the Steelers franchise in the 90s, having been very successful, although they weren't able to capture a Super Bowl during that time. But Bill Cowher Steelers were something to behold, and especially with some of the big games that many NFL fans remember that you were there to be a part of, particularly when you guys played against the Chargers and the Stan Humphries team that started 1-5 and became 11-5, and then you guys lost in the playoffs. And that it must have stung during that time. But if there's anything that I'm sure you must have learned out of that, is that you had been used to painful losses that you utilized as adversity to make it big the next time around, that you got that chance to be in the big game.
Yeah, I mean, that team that lost to the San Diego Chargers in the AFC Championship game was probably the best team that I ever played on, outside the 1999 Jaguars when we lost to the Titans in the AFC Championship day. Because that team we had the number one defense in the NFL, and we had the number one rushing attack in the NFL. I mean, we pound and ground you. All right, we went after you. We had Barry Foster back there. We had Bam Morris. We had a stellar offensive line. We had a tight end, Eric Green. We had a stickler of a defense. We had Greg Lloyd, Kevin Green, LeVon Kirkland, Chad Brown, Rod Woodson, Carnell Lake. That team was locked and loaded. I mean, so there was absolutely no reason for us to have lost that game against the Chargers. We kept them in the game. We should have annihilated them early on and gave them no chance to breathe, but we did, and we ended up losing the game because Tim McKyer gave up a 80-yard bomb, with like 3 minutes left to go in the game, and then we tried to come back and win the game, and we came up short. But the very next year, we had that opportunity, and we kind of redeemed ourselves. Now, we didn't win the Super Bowl, but we knew we had a good enough team that we could actually go to the Super Bowl. And we ended up beating the Colts in the AFC Championship game that year, and then we lost to the Cowboys 27-17 because we had two costly turnovers thrown by Neil O'Donnell that actually led to our demise.
And that game too, people talk about all-time gutsy calls, and especially with, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was the end of that AFC Championship game. Was it Jim Harbaugh who was on the Colts, and they threw the Hail Mary into the end zone, and they almost caught it and it fell out of his hands? What would have went through your mind on the sideline watching that play right there? Because that is one of the craziest plays in Colts history that didn't happen.
Well, the thing I remember the most about that pass is that ball stayed in the air for like 20 seconds because all I was doing is reminiscing on how painful it was the year before that we lost because of a Hail Mary pass that was thrown. And then I said to myself, I know damn well this is not going to happen 2 years in a row. So when that ball went through that receiver's chest and hit the ground, I was elated because I knew that we were going to the Super Bowl, and it was just sheer joy and satisfaction knowing that we had accomplished our goal.
Now, when you went to the Super Bowl, you played against the Dallas Cowboys, and their head coach was the man who claimed that he wanted to draft you, and that started the whole draft ordeal. So what was going through your mind before that game, and how did you handle the pain of the loss, knowing that maybe had fate changed, you would have been a Dallas Cowboy, you could have been on the other side of that Super Bowl victory?
Well, actually, it wasn't Jimmy Johnson. It was actually Barry Switzer, who was the head coach at that particular time with the Cowboys when we lost to him in the Super Bowl. But I had a lot of former teammates on the other side of the ball, guys that I played with at the University of Miami, and it was very frustrating. I'm not a good loser. I don't know whoever is a good loser, but my former teammates were telling me, you'll be back next year, this, and that, while the Cowboys confetti is raining on me. They're trying to console me, and I'm not really trying to hear that because I knew that we had a team good enough to win the Super Bowl. And I remember going into the locker room, the media is all around my locker and asked me questions about the game and this, that. And I only said a couple of words. I said, "To hell with the Cowboys," and that was it. That was in my interview. I mean, that's how frustrating it was. That game is the most devastating loss that I have ever sustained in my career playing football, because anytime you get that close to winning a championship, because I had never lost a championship before. You got to remember, I went to the University of Miami and I played in 3 national championships and we won them all. So I just thought that it was just sheer destiny that I'll be in the Super Bowl and win it. And then for me not to have won that Super Bowl was probably as frustrating a thing that I had to deal with.
And for the listener out there who's hearing this episode, it's so hard to even begin to quantify how difficult it is to play in a Super Bowl. I know that people, couch quarterbacks and couch GMs and the fans at home, they love to rag on people that lose or make mistakes at such a big stage, or Patrick Mahomes not being able to lead the Chiefs. And, oh yeah, I knew it, he's not as good as we thought, or whoever it may be. But when you really think about how hard it is and how many people are trying to be on an NFL team, how many NFL teams are trying to win the Super Bowl, and everything that goes into that competition, it's such an insanely rare feat to achieve in life, and to come up short in that game, especially the way that game ended too, relatively close, not that far apart in terms of the margin of victory, but the two costly turnovers, the interceptions that people will always look back on and remember. And even I think it was one of the cornerbacks who had picked off one of his passes, got a huge bloated contract after that season, but never lived up to it, because the fame of making a play like that in the Super Bowl is so otherworldly.
See, what I think is that I don't think the fans can totally appreciate what actually goes into a football season. I mean, because you're talking about once the season ends in February, you're essentially taking 2 weeks off, and then you're back on the grind. You're back training, you're back lifting, you're back running. Then you got mini camps, you got OTAs, you got training camps, you got preseason. Then you've got the season, and then the season's a grind in itself. You're practicing. You're practicing Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, walkthroughs on Saturday, and then you've got to perform at a high level on Sundays. And we're talking about 16 weeks. And if you're lucky enough, you don't get hurt. You keep your team pretty healthy, and then you get the opportunity to play in the playoffs. And now when you go in the playoffs, you got to win on the road, you got to win at home, and then you're going up against the level of competition as equal to you or even better than you. And then if you're lucky enough to do that, you get to the AFC Championship game. Then you got to win the AFC Championship game, whether you're at home or you're on the road. And then you go to the Super Bowl. And then the pressure of winning that Super Bowl is astounding. That's why I don't get the narrative behind the Buffalo Bills. Do you know how the Buffalo Bills went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row? But they don't get credit for going to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row. All the narrative about the Bills is that, they lost 4 Super Bowls. But do you know how hard it is to get to 1 Super Bowl, let alone 4 Super Bowls in a row? I mean, I have nothing but mad love for that organization, Marv Levy, and the players on that staff, because it's hard to go to 1 Super Bowl, let alone 4 Super Bowls in a row. And, I was young when I lost the Super Bowl, and there's something in my spirit is like, you know what? You're young, you'll get back to it. But it never happened. So you've got to savor those moments when you get to the Super Bowl. Now, it'll be granted if you win it, it's outstanding if you win it, but just the journey, the grind, the blood, the sweat, and tears that you put in to just get to a Super Bowl is something that I don't think the fans can truly appreciate. And when you lose it, it's devastating to you as a player.
And especially the way that you tied in your history at the University of Miami, with having won 3 national championships with the Hurricanes, it almost seemed like a foregone conclusion that type of success would be able to be maybe as easily repeated, or maybe it's just a little bit harder because, well, we came from an amazing organization and we were world-class and all these sorts of things, but it's hard. When you guys lost the Catholics versus Convicts game, now football fans will see it forever enshrined in NCAA football history because of the rivalry and the context of the t-shirts and the way the game went and the missed 2-point conversion and all these sorts of things. But that was just for a chance to get to the national championship. That wasn't the national championship. And you guys use that as fuel to motivate yourselves for the next year to be able to go on that incredible run. Now in the NFL, you played for 2 organizations that were outstanding during the time that you played for them, the Steelers and the Jaguars. And even with the Jaguars, it was such a new thing at the time because them and the Panthers were inaugural teams in 1995. It was their first ever year in existence.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a double expansion that hadn't happened in the NFL for a long time. So what were your thoughts when you had the opportunity to go to Jacksonville on what that part of your football journey might bring you?
Well, actually, I signed with the Jaguars in 1996. It was actually going into their second year of existence, and I could have been comfortable. I could have signed with the Steelers, and we could have probably made a couple of runs at the Super Bowl. But I was always one looking for a challenge, and the narrative with the Steelers at that particular time is that they made me. They felt in our negotiations during free agency, they had spoken to my agent and told me that I was a product of their system. That if I had went anywhere else, I wasn't going to have the same success. The type of money that I was asking for, I didn't deserve it. So I took it upon myself to prove them wrong and prove myself right, that I could go anywhere and have success. And that's the reason why I left the Steelers. I left the Steelers. I mean, you don't leave a storied program, a storied organization like the Steelers and go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I didn't want to be comfortable. I didn't want to be in the box. I wanted to prove to myself that I could go anywhere and have success. And that's one of the main reasons I left Pittsburgh, is because I wanted to go to this new team and see if I could have success there. And early on, it was a little rocky. I was a little concerned. I was a little distraught because we had lost games that we should have won. And we started the season off at 4-7. But we ran 5 straight after that. And next thing you know, we're in the playoffs. And we're in the playoffs, and we're on the road, and we're playing the Buffalo Bills, and we beat the Bills, who were 10-0 in the postseason at home. And then we went on the road against the mighty Denver Broncos, who were 13-3, the number 1 seed in the AFC, and we beat the Denver Broncos on the road. And next thing you know, we're in the AFC Championship game, 1 game away from the Super Bowl. So that's the kind of stuff that I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to be a part of shaping and molding the Jacksonville Jaguars into a household name. And I think for the most part, the years that I was there, I helped put Jacksonville on the map.
No doubt, and especially during one of the most magical runs in Jaguars playoff history against the Denver Broncos, the very, very famous game for Jacksonville and infamous for Denver. And for the listener out there that might not know the full context behind this story, you mentioned the Jaguars starting 4-7, and it wasn't, if not for a botched 31-yard field goal by Morton Anderson in week 17, the Jaguars wouldn't have even made the playoffs. They were 8-7 and needed to beat the Falcons. And all Morton Anderson had to do was knock in a chippy from 31. And it looked like he slipped as he was planted to kick the ball. It sails wide right. And next thing you know, you hear Brian Sexton's call, it's no good, it's no good. And the Jaguars are going to the playoffs. And the win in Buffalo and the game in Denver. I want to dive into that a little bit more. From watching NFL Network and the specials they did on biggest upsets, that was hailed as one of the biggest upsets. And John Elway even says to this day, that's probably the most devastating loss he experienced in his career, even though he lost 5 Super Bowls, or he had been to 5 Super Bowls. And I think he had lost 3 of them or something like that. But you guys were called the Jaguars before that game, and you guys were a very new team. But how did you feel going into Denver, playing a mile high, knowing you guys were playing against Shannon Sharpe and John Elway and all these amazing players? What was Leon Searcy thinking during that time?
Well, for me personally, because I had played for the Steelers, I had played in big games before, so I was seasoned. And what I was telling her, and we had a pretty, outside of Boselli, Waddell, Dave Waddell, we had a seasoned group up front. And what we just said, we're just going to play our game. We're not going to get rattled. If we get down early, we're just going to chip away. We're going to run the ball. We're going to play action. We're going to take our shots. We're going to protect. We're going to control the line of scrimmage. And we just took it upon ourselves that we wanted the game to be in our hands. We had Natron Means back there. We had Mark Brunell, Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardell. We just told them to make plays. Up front, we're going to take care of business. Mark is not going to be rattled. He's not going to be pressured. We're going to run the ball effectively. And let's see what happens. We were 14-point dogs going into the game. Everybody had already picked the Broncos to play in the Super Bowl. And we just said to ourselves, you know what? This is a heavyweight fight. And in the heavyweight fight, you don't win in the first round. You don't win the second round. As long as you stay in the fight, we'll find out towards the end, who's going to come out the winner. And that's what we did. We just took it round by round. We just took it quarter by quarter. And it sounds a little cliche, but that's just the way we thought. We just figured this. If we stay in the game, because they jumped out on us early. They jumped out on us early. They were up. I think they were up on us like 12-0 at the beginning of the game. And then at halftime, we was up 13-12. So all the pressure was on them after that. When we went into halftime, that's what we were saying. We were not even supposed to be in this game. All the pressure's on them. They're the number one seed. They're supposed to blow us out. We're going to stay in the game. We're going to keep the pressure on them by controlling the clock, running the ball, protecting the passer, taking our shots at the end. And you know what? They're going to rattle at the end. They're going to crack under pressure at the end because we got nothing to lose. We're playing with house money. We're playing with house money. No one expects us to win, so we might as well go in there and see what we can do.
As a Jaguars fan, watching highlights back of that game just gives me chills knowing what the stakes were for Denver to get to the Super Bowl, and the famous clip of Shannon Sharpe picking up the phone and call the president, we need the National Guard because, you know, they're doing outstanding. And that soundbite in particular always stands out. But for the fans who have seen that game, they remember Mark Brunell's throw to Jimmy Smith in the end zone, his run for, I think it was 20 plus yards, something like that. It was crazy. What was going through your mind during that game when you saw some of those big chunk plays? Like, how did you handle, you know, your assignment while also trying not to get too excited about what was going on, but knowing that you guys were pulling off one of the biggest upsets in NFL history?
Well, you know, it really didn't dawn upon us how big a victory it was until after the game. You know, everybody was just calm and collective. I just remember being on the sideline with the offensive line, and the offensive line is, listen, let's keep doing what we're doing. We were controlling the line of scrimmage. We were pushing them back. You know, Natron was getting the yards. He was finishing every play. We were converting on first downs. Mark was making the necessary throws to convert on third down situations. We didn't have a lot of penalties because penalties and turnovers in a game like that could be magnified if it's a close game. And we knew it was going to be a close game. So we knew we had to play a flawless game if we were going to beat the Broncos. Because the Broncos, you know, if you don't remember that season, the Broncos were lighting everybody up, running the ball, passing the ball. So we just said to ourselves, just stay in the game and give us to the fourth quarter, and we see if we can win it. And I remember when the Broncos had made the score 23-20, and we had the ball with like a little over maybe 8 minutes to go. The most refreshing thing that happened in that huddle is that when we got the ball, Mark Brunell came in the huddle, was like, y'all having fun yet? So that just kind of mellowed everybody out. He was like, you having fun yet? This is fun. He said, look at this. We're up 3 points with 8 minutes to go in the game. We're in this game. We're going to win this freaking game. When he said that, and I get chills thinking about it right now. When he said that, we knew we were going to win the game because he was confident. It's not like your quarterback coming to the huddle and say, hey, look, y'all having fun yet? Put a smile on your face. We're going to win this game. And that's what he said. And that's what we did. Because a field goal was not going to cement the victory because, you know, the next drive, Elway drove right down and scored a touchdown. So we knew we had to score a touchdown to put this game away, and that's what we did. And I tell people to this day, the greatest catch in Jaguar history is Mark Brunell to Jimmy Smith in the back of the end zone against the Denver Broncos. That's the greatest catch in Jacksonville Jaguar history.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And the call, the setting, the throw, the catch, double coverage, everything. Jimmy Smith laid everything on the line that he had and made one of the great acrobatic catches in Jaguars history. And especially to cap off an unbelievable Cinderella story to get you guys into the playoffs, let alone win in Buffalo, let alone win in Denver. And after all that had happened, I think that was probably one of the biggest games in the team's history, especially during their second season ever, to really let the NFL know, hey, Jacksonville's here to compete and they're not just going to roll over.
No. What that game did is it instilled a lot of confidence us as players because, you know, we could have easily been one-hit wonders. You know, we could have had the magical 1996 season and just went away in obscurity. But no, the next year we went, 11-5. The year after that, we go 12-4. The year after that, we go 14-2. I mean, so just the fact that we elevated our play year in and year out is attributed not only to Tom Coughlin and his coaching staff, but to the dedication of the players, because the players didn't want this to be, some fly-by-night season. They wanted to be able to establish the Jacksonville Jaguars, as one of the elite teams in the NFL. And for that period of time, from 96 to 2000, we were considered one of the elite teams in the NFL.
And especially with the offensive line that you played on, one of the greatest Jaguar linemen ever, Tony Baselli, played opposite side to you at left tackle and had one of the most tremendous careers that a Jaguar player could have, especially during such a crucial time. Talk a bit about your relationship with him and how his growth went in the vision of your eyes as you were already a seasoned veteran and he was just entering the league. What was it like playing opposite side to Tony?
Well, Tony and I were competitors. We competed against each other, to be quite honest with you, which made us better. He knew that his game had to be on point because my game was going to be on point. I knew my game had to be on point because I knew his game was going to be on point, which made us stellar bookend tackles because we were such competitors in everything we did. In practice, when we conditioned, when we were in the weight room, how we studied, how we got after people. And what that did is that went across the whole offensive line because we held ourselves to such a high standard that the guys that played next to us, we held them to that same standard. And that's the reason why we had one of the more successful offensive lines in the NFL, is because we held everybody accountable. And, you couldn't have any onion skin. If we called you out, it was for the betterment of the team. And rightfully so. If you called us out, we understood it. But we were fierce competitors while we were on the team. We were good friends while we were on the team. But I think that we wanted to outshine each other when we played. No matter whether he was going up against Jason Taylor or I was going up against Michael Strahan, where he was going up against Bruce Smith and I was going up against Derek Thomas. He was going up against Michael McCrary. I was going up against Peter Borware. We wanted to play our best football, especially when the level of competition presented itself.
Who's the toughest defensive lineman that you ever had to handle during your time with the Jaguars?
With the Jaguars, the toughest defensive tackle I ever had to go up against was probably Michael Strahan. Michael Strahan was pretty tough. Big, fast, physical, long, uses his hands well. He was a fierce competitor. He was probably the toughest guy. Another guy named Rob Burnett. He was a defensive end for the Ravens that I had to go up against. He was pretty tough as well. But those two guys are probably the toughest competitors that I had to go up against when I was a Jaguar.
And Michael Strahan, again, another tremendous player, and Burnett as well was outstanding for the Ravens during a time when it seemed that defense reigned supreme during the late 90s with the way that the Ravens won the Super Bowl. And then eventually when the Giants won the Super Bowl, when Strahan was on the team in 2007, they won through defense against what was supposed to be the greatest NFL team ever. So during that 99 season, obviously for Jaguars fans, they would know that it ended in bitter disappointment with the third loss to the same team within the same year, and the only team in NFL history to only lose to one team besides, and not to make it to the Super Bowl, going 14-2 and losing to the Titans. But regardless of the way that it ended, what it also did to keep up with that consistency of the Jaguar success and everything you guys were able to achieve during that season, it was just a season like no other for the city of Jacksonville. And that team has gone down in history as one of the greatest offenses, greatest defenses, most electrifying play. Talk about some of your favorite memories that you had from playing with the Jaguars in 1999.
We had all kind of talent, on both sides of the ball. I mean, we had literally, 8 Pro Bowlers on the team. Me, Baselli, Brunell, Jimmy Smith, Fred, Keenan, Tony Brackens, Kevin Hardy, Cornell Lake. Probably in my whole career, probably the most talented football team I ever been on. I don't like to reminisce as much about the 99 season, although the 15 wins is still a Jacksonville Jaguar, record. for the most wins in the season. It's still frustrating to me with a team as talented as we were to have not participated and possibly could have won a Super Bowl. So as much as I loved being on that 99 team, it's still very, frustrating for me to think about what we could have been if we had, just beaten the Titans in that championship game.
And even as just a Jaguars fan, it's always frustrating to look back on some of those unfortunate moments through history. But needless to say, I think one of the highlights of that entire season had to have been sending Dan Marino into retirement and winning against the Miami Dolphins 62-7 at Jacksonville Municipal Stadium in the biggest blowout in NFL playoff history, and one of the biggest blowouts just ever, first in Jacksonville history, and then one of the biggest blowouts that the NFL has ever seen. What was it like playing in that game, knowing that Dan Marino was going to retire after the season, and everybody was talking about him having that one last shot and maybe winning the Super Bowl, and then just the polar opposite happening? And even like Tony Bracken's touchdown, like he didn't think he was down, or he thought he was already down, and then stumbling into the end zone. How fun was it to play in that game?
It was fun. It was a type of game where everything just seemed to be going in our way. I mean, the Fred Taylor run, the screen pass to Fred Taylor, the Tony Bracken's, touchdown, Jimmy Smith. I mean, everything just seemed to be falling in our way. And I just remember being on the sidelines. I think we were up 45-0 or something like that. And I said to myself, you know what? We've scored enough points. I said, we're probably going to need some of these points next week. I just remember being on the sideline saying that. But it was a fun game because it was actually the first time we had, the road to the Super Bowl had to come through Jacksonville. We were the number one seed. Tom Coughlin had talked about that throughout my stint in Jacksonville's, that if we ever get an opportunity where the road to the Super Bowl has to come to Jacksonville, we want to take full advantage of it. And we did for the most part in that first game. It was just a fun game. It was a very fun game to be in, a lot of laughing and joking and giggling going on after the game because the points just seemed to be rolling in so easily. I wish we could have used at least 30 of those points for the next week against the Titans. So it was cool winning a game like that, but just unfortunate that the next week that we had to play the Titans that we ended up losing.
It's a tough game, but to send out Dan Marino in style is something that will never be able to be taken away from you, and that's truly true. It's truly a monumental game in Jaguars history, and with the way that things are looking to turn around this year, Urban Meyer now making his way back to the NFL, back to football with Jacksonville, and the first pick in the draft this year, next month, and the Jaguars potentially looking to take Trevor Lawrence from Clemson University. What are your thoughts on the potential of the Jaguars to create a new era with Urban Meyer as the head coach, and to watch the Jaguars from afar, knowing that they played such an important part of your career in the NFL?
Well, I like the hire. I like the fact that, Urban Meyer is a proven winner. At every collegiate level, he's had success. From Bowling Green to Utah to Florida to Ohio State, he's been a winner. And in Jacksonville, unfortunately, over the last 2 decades, have had a culture of losing. We've only had 3 winning seasons in the last 20 years. And I think that's the big first thing and foremost that he's got to do. He's got to change the culture, the thinking, the mindset of these players is that losing will not be tolerated. And I like that about him. And I like the fact that he put together, a coaching staff that has NFL experience. I like some of the moves that he's making in free agency. So we're going to see. We're going to see, if he's going to be able to answer the bell. Trevor Lawrence is a once-in-a-generational quarterback. I believe he's going to be an outstanding quarterback in my assessment. In my opinion, my humble opinion, I already think he's the second best quarterback in Jaguars history behind Mark Brunell. He hasn't even taken a snap. There's a lot of positive energy going on here in Jacksonville right now that we haven't had in such a long time. And do I expect a quick turnabout? No, but I just want to see this team compete to the highest level. And if you compete to the highest level and you exert yourself and you don't tolerate losing, and if he puts that in the mindset of the players, it's a couple of games that you may not be expected to win that you could win. So I love being a Jaguar. I love everything about it, and it's hard for me to tolerate losing because I helped. It's almost like this. It's almost like when you build a house and someone's renting it and they trash it. That's how I feel for. I was here from the upstart. Maybe not the first year, but I was here to help build the foundation of this organization, and I just didn't like the direction that it was going. And hopefully, he can put some smiles on Jaguar faces again, because I know this fan base is loyal and faithful to his Jaguars, and they deserve a winner.
You're 100% right, and it's going to be something that all the Jaguars and the rest of the NFL will have to hold their breath to wait and see come April and come the 2021 NFL season, how things start to turn around and to see the Jaguars be competitive again. Because quite honestly, if you look at the way their history has gone, that's a perfect analogy that you used, is that you built a house nice and clean and it gets rented out and it's trashed. And the city of Jacksonville has to be ever so loyal for them to hang around in the NFL, because they're considered a small market team. And because of the many years of losing they've had as compared to the winning years when you were there during your time in the late 90s, it's kind of been the opposite of what fans would have hoped. But there's hope on the horizon now for Jacksonville, and I really, really want it to turn around for them so that the fans, myself included, can really see them shine once again like they did during their early glory days.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Leon, we're getting towards the end of our time here in today's recording. And so I wanted to ask you a few questions to wrap up and have some fun before we part for today's episode.
Sounds good.
So the first question I have for you is, who was the funniest teammate you ever played with in college, and who's the funniest teammate you played with in the NFL?
The funniest teammate I ever played with in college, Horace Copeland. Horace Copeland actually went to my high school at Evans. I was a senior. He was a sophomore. I was his host as well when he came to the University of Miami. Horace Copeland is definitely one of the. Warren Sapp, you got to throw Warren in there too. Warren has some cruel humor, but it's still funny. But those two guys, in the NFL, the funniest guy I've been around in the NFL was probably Aaron Beasley. Aaron Beasley was a character. We used to kill him. We used to call him Killer Bees, but he was a real jokester and prankster. But Aaron Beasley is probably one of the funniest guys I ever dealt with in the NFL.
Who is the best coach that you ever had in your entire football career?
Best coach I ever had in my entire football career is Jimmy Johnson. And I say Jimmy Johnson because I tell people this too every day. University of Miami taught me how to be a champion. And, Jimmy Johnson recruited me out of, my high school, and I had 2 years under Jimmy Johnson. And he was a stickler on perfection and accountability and toughness and mental toughness and conditioning and all that kind of stuff. And, that resonated with me throughout my career at Miami and carried over until I went to the NFL. So Jimmy Johnson is definitely the best coach I've ever had in my career.
I remember a part of the book you were talking about when he was leaving to go to the Cowboys. He had looked at you and said, Leon, if you don't make the NFL and if you don't become the best lineman by the time you graduate, you've cheated your family, you've cheated your friends, your teammates, you cheated yourself. And I can only imagine the fire that lit underneath you to really go out and to manifest that.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Johnson saw something in me that no one else did. You got to remember, when he said that to me, I hadn't played a down yet at the University of Miami. I was a redshirt freshman. He was going to the NFL, and he basically pulled me in the room and told me, if I don't leave University of Miami as the best offensive lineman in the history of the school, he said, I've cheated the university, I've cheated my family, I've cheated myself, and I cheated my teammates. And that's a lot of pressure for a 19-year-old kid who hadn't even played a down. but he believed in me. He saw something in me that I probably didn't even see in myself, and he motivated me to manifest what he saw in me. So I like to say that, my career at Miami, I'm considered, one of the, one or two greatest offensive linemen to ever play at the history of the school.
Which is no small feat in and of itself. And
Mm-hmm.
to be touted that highly at that position, arguably tied with quarterback for the most important position of football,
Mm-hmm.
at one of the best schools in NCAA history is truly just such a remarkable achievement.
Yes. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I made this decision to go to the University of Miami.
The next question I have to ask you is, if you were to give younger Leon advice before entering the NFL on what to do, how to expect to roll with the punches that you may deal with during your career, what would it be and why?
If I was to talk to young Leon Searcy, I would tell young Leon the Searcy to treat himself like a corporation. Hire and fire people accordingly. And learn how to say no. As you read through the book, I had a very giving heart. Now I did a lot of things I wasn't supposed to do. I spurged, I spent money, I hung out, I did those kind of things. But I had a very giving soul. Because I had a very giving soul, because I thought that, where I was, that I owed other people the same accolades that I had achieved while I was playing, and I didn't, because blessings aren't for everybody. So that's what I would tell them. Put away your money, save your money, learn how to say no, and learn to hire and fire people accordingly.
I really like that, because it's such a perfect analogy as to how life can go in the NFL, and people always look and see, oh, they make tons of money and ooh la la, and they're famous and they're $1 million commodities. But you look at the percentage of people that become bankrupt or broke after playing in their career, you'd think, how would someone go through all that money? But you'd be surprised. And
Yes,
it's not something to take for granted. That's for sure.
absolutely. When 78% of athletes that leave the NFL leave the NFL broke or bankrupt, that's not a problem. That's a dilemma.
100%. And I wanted to ask you as well about Real Men Block and your involvement with that, and how you're looking to inspire change in the next generation. So can you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah, Real Men Block is a sports apparel line for offensive linemen. I was inspired by creating a brand for offensive linemen, maybe about 5 years ago. I used to train offensive linemen. Agents used to call me up and have me train offensive linemen to get them ready for the combine or their pro day. And I just got inspired because the offensive linemen, unlike wide receivers, DBs, and running backs, they didn't have the attire, the proper attire to wear, that suited them. There's Under Armour and those old things, but I wanted to create a brand that was specific to offensive linemen. And so that's why I came up with the young concept. It's going to be a sports apparel line. It's going to include camps. It's going to include camps to help offensive linemen with the technique fundamentals and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of rebooting it. It's something that I opened up about 3 years ago, and then it kind of, it kind of went away. But then I'm going to reboot it this summer. So I'm going to start a Real Men Block again come summer 2021.
We'll definitely want to make sure to look out for that, for the listener out there, because it's so critical to make sure that linemen are always looked at in high regard, because people always look at quarterbacks as the heroes and the glory cowboys. But there's an old saying that goes, offensive linemen are like the rowers in a Viking ship. They don't get much credit for what they do, but if they don't do their job well, the ship ain't going nowhere.
There you go. Absolutely.
So the final question I want to ask you today, Leon, is what is the sweetest victory you ever experienced during your entire football career? The one that you love the most?
The sweetest victory I ever had in my career was probably, 1991, when we wide right won. When we number 1 Florida State versus number 2 Miami, the game of the century. wide right one. And I said in the book, if you remember, I was on the sideline and I said he was going to miss it to the right. A lot of people don't believe me when I said that, but I remember specifically being on the sideline, all the guys holding hands and everything with the guys about to kick the field goal. And I said, man, he's going to miss it to the right. And lo and behold, he missed it wide right.
And that game, there's so many stories that come out of that game, and it's just absolutely crazy to think about calling that right then and there in that moment. It reminds me of in the NBA and I think it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, of Baron Davis, when he was in the Charlotte Hornets. He was saying to his defender with like 9/10 of a second left, he said, I'm going to sink this full court shot right here. And people were like, oh no, like he didn't say that he called it. And then in the paper, he said, go ask my defender, go ask him. And he called it from full court, bang, swish. So that's what it makes me think of. And it's crazy to think that you're able to call that in that moment and how impactful it was in terms of the rivalry that existed within Florida between the Hurricanes and the Seminoles, and what that meant for the Hurricanes just in general.
Oh yeah, it was a sweet victory. Gave me my third championship ring.
And the third time's the charm, like they say. And with
Absolutely.
that, Leon, I want to thank you so much for being on today's episode. It was truly fantastic to talk to you about your experiences playing in the NFL, playing for the Hurricanes, talking about your book. So I want you, the listener out there, to go and check out Fourth Down and Damn. You need to pick up a copy today. It's absolutely an amazing read for all football fans out there and sports fans in general. You'll definitely want to check that out. Leon, thank you for being on today's episode so much. I really had a great time.
Hey, I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for listening to today's episode with All-Pro lineman Leon Searcy.